Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. I am Maury Wilson with the Ten Commandments Keepers of Israel, or Yasharal, however you want to say it. But today, I'm doing something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, and that's bring the teaching out as far as identifying the true biblical Israelites. Now, I know this is a controversial topic and everything like that, but once again, I'm here to present the facts, present the sources that I have. One thing I always say is, "Hey, source up or shut up." And I know a lot of other brothers in the Israelite community do the same thing. So I'm going to provide sources. I'm going to provide different types of evidence to show who the true biblical Israelites are. So before I get into it, I just want to pray, and then we can get right into it. Most High Heavenly Father, I just thank you for just everything that you do. Thank you for this teaching that I'm about to bring forth. I ask that you bless it and allow it to bless somebody else as well, Father. I ask that you allow it to open eyes, Father. And I just ask that you allow it to wake your people up, Father. And right now, Father, I just pray that you just speak through me with your Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. I thank you for Yahushua HaMashiach, your son, who is my master. And I just want to just praise you and give you all the glory, honor, and praise. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, I pray this prayer. Hallelujah. All right, y'all. So I'm going to light my incense real quick. Yeah, we can get started. So identifying Israel. And this was a series that I did during Bible study. We have a Bible study at my assembly called the Berean Bible Study, where we search out the scriptures like the Bereans did in the book of Acts. And so I'm just going to go to the next slide. Let me maximize my screen. So why do we need to identify Israel? There's always that why, right? And so here's a couple of reasons why. And the first reason being is that, and we've all heard it before, Israel is Yah's time clock, right? So in order to know what stage of prophecy we're in, we need to look to the Israelites. And for so long, we've been looking to, who we thought were Israelites. And I'm not saying that some of them aren't, but I'm just saying we've been looking at the wrong people, if you will. Also, Israel is the only nation the Most High ever knew and chose. You can read that in Deuteronomy 14:2, Psalms 135:4, Deuteronomy 7, 6 through 8. You can read that there. Also, the oracles, which is the divine law and the words of the Most High Yah, were given to Israel, as stated in Romans 3:1-2. And then lastly, through Israel, all the nations of the world will be blessed. You can read that. You can read about that in Genesis 22:18, as well as Isaiah 11:1-16. All right. So during this presentation, we're going to identify Israel or the biblical Israelites, the bloodline descendants of the biblical Israelites, through three means or three ways. The first one is prophecy/scripture, which should be the foundation. Like I always like to say, all the other evidence is not as strong as the biblical evidence, right? The Bible should be our end all be all, if you will. The scripture should be the end all be all. However, there's a lot of debates about scripture and different things like that. So we add history and genetics into it as well. So the first way, and in my opinion, the most sound way, is through prophecy and scripture. Also, we're going to go into history. We're going to go into historical sources. And then lastly, we're going to go into genetics. Now, I'm not a geneticist. I want to give y'all that warning that I'm not a geneticist or anything like that. But, I am a capable human being of discerning information. And I know how to read. I'm literate. I have a college degree and all that type of stuff. So I'm able to interpret studies and different sources. So I do want to give that precursor. All right, so prophecy. So we're going to go over the blessings and curses of Israel. We're going to go over the scattering of Israel, and we're going to go over the prophecies regarding the regathering of Israel, or the second Exodus, which is supposed to happen in the end times. All right, the blessings and curses of Israel. In Deuteronomy 11:26-28, Israel has a choice to either obey or disobey, right? And there's blessings and curses for if they obey or disobey. Second thing is Deuteronomy 28 lays out the blessings and curses. Verses 1-14 for the blessings, and verses 15-68 are for the curses. Now you can read all of this on your own. I'm just providing you the scriptures. Also, you have the 400-year prophecy given to Abraham, which is in Genesis 15:12 through 14. Now, one thing that I want to stress is that the Israelites were not in Egypt for 400 years. And you can tell that by if you do the math from when Jacob and the sons of Israel went into Egypt, and then when Moses came out of Egypt, it was only like 2 or 3 generations. The most time that they could have been in Egypt was 250 years. And they weren't enslaved in Egypt the whole time they were there, because remember, when they came into Egypt, they had favor via Joseph. Joseph was, he had a high ranking position. And so his family, they moved into the area of Goshen and they were blessed. It wasn't until a Pharaoh that arose that didn't know who Yusuf or Joseph was, that began to afflict the Israelites. So the Israelites weren't in Egypt for 400 years, first off. And second off, they weren't enslaved in Egypt for no more than 100 years. So I want to point that out. And there, and you can you can search up on YouTube. There's a lot of videos breaking down the numerical timeline as far as how many years that they could have possibly been in Egypt. All right, Israel scattered, right? So these are prophecies in regards to Israel being scattered. Deuteronomy 28:64, Leviticus 26:33, Jeremiah 9:16, Zephaniah 3:10, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. If you know where Ethiopia is and you know what the rivers of Ethiopia is, that's the Nile River. And on the opposite side of the Nile River is going towards Western Africa. All right. And there have only been one stock of people that have been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, aka the old world and the new world, and that's the Israelites. And more specifically, that's who you would call Black people or Negroes. We're the only race of people, and I don't even like to use that word race because race is a made-up concept. Everything in antiquity, and even before the the transatlantic slave trade was about nationality and ethnicity. There was no such thing as race. That's why if you look at communities like the Bedouin communities, you have Black Bedouins and you have more lighter pale Bedouins with straighter hair. You see what I'm saying? Also, when you look at the North Africans, the Berbers, you have the same thing. You have Black Berbers and you have what you would call white Berbers. You see what I'm saying? But they're all Berbers or they're all Bedouins. You see what I'm saying? Because here's the thing, they are all the same ethnicity. You see what I'm saying? They're all of the same nation. So it's about nation, and that's why I like to give this this precursor or this forewarning that there are Israelites who aren't Black. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's look at Pat Mahomes, right? Everybody know Pat Mahomes, quarterback. Pat Mahomes' father is Black and his mother is white, right? With that being said, Pat Mahomes is mixed race. We would consider him Black, although he's mixed race, right? But Pat Mahomes has a white wife. Pat Mahomes' daughter looks like a white person. However, she comes from the seed of a Black man. So that Black man is an Israelite, and his granddaughter looks like any other white person. That white baby would be an Israelite because she comes from the seed of an Israelite, because it's about who your father is. So I like to give that precursor. However, I do believe that most of the Israelites, or the original of the Israelite stock, was what you would call Negro or Black, and I'm going to prove that. So there have only been one stock of people that have been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, aka the old world and the new world. So we all know what the old world is. That's the world that was known, whether it was from Egypt and Kush all the way to Babylonia, Elam, you know what I mean, in different places like that. Turkey, Iran, India, all of those places were the old world. And then you have the new world, which is going across the Atlantic Ocean, the Americas. So there have only been one nation of people, or one stock of people, that have been scattered to both the old world and the new world. So I just wanted to show you how we've been dispersed. Here you have photos of Afro-Indians, which are called the cities. You have Brazilians. Matter of fact, most of the slaves in the transatlantic slave trade went to Brazil. America only received, I want to say, about 400,000 slaves in total. But Brazil received, I want to say, upwards of 4 million, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can fact check that in the comments. So you have more black people in Brazil than you have in America. Also, you have Afro-Arabians, right? You have Afro-Yemeni as well. You have Afro-Iranians, Afro-Iraqis. Here are some Afro-Iraqis right here. You have Afro-Syrians. You have Afro people in every nation of the earth. All right, here's some prophecies in regards to the regathering or the second exodus of Israel. Just taking a sip of water. So you have Jeremiah 31. You have Isaiah 11, which is one of my favorite. You have Jeremiah 16 and 14 through 15. You have Ezekiel 11, 17 through 20. You have Hosea 2, 14 through 23. You have Zechariah chapter 2. You have Joel chapter 2, verses 18 through 32. And you have Luke 21, 20 through 28, where Christ is telling the Israelites that they will be taken captive into every nation. So these are all regarding the regathering of Israel. And I definitely advise that you check out these prophecies and ask yourself where these prophecies fulfilled in 1948 with the, with the state that's over there in the land. I'm not going to say any specific names. All right, so let's ask, was the regathering fulfilled in 1948? All right, you have the Balfour Declaration, which allowed the people who currently occupy the land to come into the land of Palestine, taking it over from the Ottoman Turks. So you have to realize one thing, right? Over periods of time, you had different conquerors. One of the most conquered and colonized lands is from Iraq to Egypt, right? Because those were constantly places where there were great civilizations, great kingdoms, and wars. So you would have different conquerings and taking over the land. So the land of Israel has been taken over by the Babylonians, by the Assyrians, by the Greeks, by the Romans, by the Medes and Persians, by the Arabs, and by the Ottoman Turks. So it's been colonized by many different peoples over thousands of years. So the Balfour Declaration, which was signed, I want to say in World War II, which basically was a promise from the British to the people who currently occupy the land that they would give them the land of Palestine. And they took it over from the Ottoman Turks. Isaiah 2 and 1 through 5 states that there will be no more war in the end times when Israel comes back into the land, because you have to realize the end times is all about regathering Israel and giving them what? Salvation or safety, bringing them back to the borders of their land. And Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, is going to be the one that rules and reigns in Israel, right? And there will be a 1,000-year reign as specified in Revelation, the book of Revelation. All right, so Ezekiel 37, 15 through 28. Judah and Ephraim are supposed to come together as one before entering the land. How is it that the people who currently occupy in Israel are the only people, right? And they claim that they're from the tribe of Judah. If you ask the current occupants what tribe they're from, they'll either say Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay, so what about all the other 12 tribes? What about Gad, Naphtali, Asher? And I'll give you Gad or Dan because they say that the Ethiopians who also are in that land, who they persecute, who they are, giving hysterectomies and all type of stuff, who they are killing in the streets, they claim that they're from the tribe of Dan, right? So you got Dan and you have Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. What about the other tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel? And this is the thing. All the tribes will have, some sort of identifying marker. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing: as we get into some of the history, you'll see historically that a lot of different tribes that were scattered in different places, they retained their identity as far as knowing who their tribe was. For example, the Igbo, who are widely recognized as Israelites, even by the current occupants of the land, they are said to be from the tribe of Gad. They trace their lineage back to the sons of Gad, Eri, and Areli. You see what I'm saying? So they have a sense of what tribe they come from. You also have tribes like the Limba, who trace their lineage back to the Levitical priesthood. You see what I'm saying? So I'm just saying all that to say, why is it that only Judah, Benjamin, Levi, and Dan are supposedly the only ones who have been regathered in 1948 and not the other tribes? All right. Also, one key thing: why don't the current occupants, right, who claim descent of the biblical Israelites, why don't they control Jerusalem? Jerusalem is controlled by Muslims, where the Dome of the Rock is. Tel Aviv is not Jerusalem. And honestly, both of those places aren't Jerusalem if you want to be honest, Jerusalem is actually much further to the south, which is in the desert. The old, like the real Jerusalem, all of those places are actually in the desert, much more south than where the current occupants live at. But the old city of Jerusalem, which is one of the most fought after cities, is controlled by the Muslims. But I thought that when the Israelites come back into the land, they would control Jerusalem and the Messiah would reign in Jerusalem. You see what I'm saying? So the regathering couldn't have been fulfilled in 1948 with all the war and chaos that's going on in the land, especially what we see just recently with the attacks from the Gaza Strip and all of that type of stuff. There's been nonstop war and casualties since the current occupants have lived in the land. So therefore, according to prophecy, they couldn't fulfill those prophecies. They couldn't have fulfilled it. All right. Also, the current occupants of Israel weren't scattered to the four corners of the earth or into every nation, but most of them come from the Caucasus, in Germany, in different places in Europe, and even the people who came from other places, right, that may have came from America or other developed nations. They weren't scattered into those nations. They were migrants to those nations. Being scattered means to be forcefully pushed into every nation. It means to go in bondage into every nation. Also, majority of the land is still desolate and deserted outside of the capital, which doesn't fulfill prophecy, because prophecy tells us that the land will be vibrant and it will be like the Garden of Eden, right? Also, the law is supposed to be written on their hearts. And all nations are supposed to come to Jerusalem to learn the ways of Yah. But the current occupants, a lot of them, practice Talmudism and have pride parades in Tel Aviv, right? Because we can read in certain prophecies like Isaiah 11 and Jeremiah and all of these different prophets where they are talking about when Yah brings the children back into the land, the children of Israel back in the land, he will give them a new heart, a heart of flesh, and take out the heart of stone. He will write their laws. He will write his laws on their hearts, right? And he also says that the nations will come up and celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. So the nations will come up and celebrate the feast days as well. And those who don't will be punished, and there will be no rain over their land, so they'll be punished by the Most High Yah. So all of these different things are supposed to happen when the true Israelites come back into the land, but yet we see those things haven't happened with the current occupation of Israel. But rather what you see is politics, if you will, trying to force prophecies. You see what I'm saying? And trying to connect dots that don't connect. Another thing, in Isaiah 11 and 15, it states that the tongue of the Egyptian sea will be destroyed and smitten into 7 streams to the point to where men will be able to walk across barefoot. In the tongue of the Egyptian sea, if you ever look at a map, I believe I have it. Hold on, right here, it's the Sinai Peninsula, right here down, right here, Sinai Peninsula. This is shaped like a tongue, right? And this is the Egyptian sea, right? And so this will be smitten into 7 streams, right? And men will be able to walk over barefoot. So that wasn't fulfilled. Yeah, you have the Suez Canal, which was man-made, but Yah says he's going to bring a strong wind and smite it into 7 streams. So it's going to be done by Yah and him only. That's the signature of prophecies given by Yah, that he will do it in him alone. All right, let's get into some scriptural references. So we have Lamentations 4 and 7 through 8. This is referring to the Nazarites. It's saying that they were purer than snow, or whiter than snow, right? And having a glow, right? That's Strong's H6705. And he said like milk. And what whiter means is pure, right? It is regarding pure, not regarding their skin tone, because we're going to see that it says their bodies are ruddy, which is Strong's H119. And ruddy is referencing a color. Ruddy is red. And what color is red? Red is really brown, like you see a ruddy heifer right here. And it says ruddy like rubies. You can see up here we have unpolished rubies. What color are those unpolished rubies? Those rubies are reddish brown. I can put my hand to right next to those rubies and it will match my skin color. Just like I can put my hand next to that ruddy heifer and it'll be the same exact color, right? Because they call us black people right? And the Negro people, the ones who were taken in the transatlantic slave trade, they call us black, but really we're not black. We're ruddy, we're brown. Even the darkest of us are a darkish brown. You won't see any literal black people unless you go to the Sudan, right? Unless you go to areas in Ethiopia where you have people like the Nilotes who are literally black. You see what I'm saying? Look up the Nilotic people. Those people are truly black. So when you see Egyptian hieroglyphs and you see people painted in the black color, those are the Nilotic people, not the Negro people. And we're not the same people. You see what I'm saying? Although we're both heavily melanated, they have a different shade of melanation. They are quite literally black. And we are, on the other hand, brown, or what you would consider ruddy. Also, it says their visage, which is Strong's 8389, which means appearance, is blacker than coal from the famine, right? So what happens to black people when they are struggling, they're in the sun or they're in a famine? Their skin gets black, gets blacker, it gets deeper, it gets a deeper hue of red. You see what I'm saying? Just like, okay, for example, and most black people will know what I'm talking about. You have people in your family who are lighter than others. What is a typical nickname that you would call them? You would call them Red, like Malcolm X was Detroit Red. Like Fred Sanford was Red Fox. You see what I'm saying? That you would call them Red. But on the other hand, the family members who are darker, what would you call them? You would call them Black, Pretty Black, or you would nickname them Black. You see what I'm saying? I have a lot of former acquaintances or homeboys, whatever you want to call it, that we nicknamed Black because they were so dark. Even though they weren't darker than the Nilotic people who are literally black, they were darker than the rest of us who are Negro people. You see what I'm saying? So that's what happens, when you're in the sun too long, when you're in famine, your skin gets blacker. All right, scriptural references. 1 Samuel 16 and 12, King David or David is described as being ruddy. And if you look into, I want to say the ASV translation of the Bible, it translates that word ruddy as dark. It says King David is dark. So King David was ruddy. He was red. He was dark brown, or ruddy like a ruddy heifer. Songs of Solomon 1 and 5 through 6. The Shulamite woman is describing herself as black. I am black but comely, right? And people be like, oh yeah, those are Shulamites. But the only problem is Shulamites are Israelites from the tribe of Issachar. You see what I'm saying? So Shunem, that is a territory in the territory of the tribe of Issachar. So the Shulamite woman, who is a Issacharite or Israelite from the tribe of Issachar, is describing herself as black, like the tents of Kedar, right? Kedar are Arabians or Ishmaelites, if you will, and Ishmaelites are black Negroes as well. Job 30 and 30. Job is describing his skin as black, right? Which is Strong's H7835, meaning dark or dusky. So Job is dark. And I read somewhere, I'm not sure, it's one of the apocryphal books. However, I'm not exactly sure, but it said Job was an Edomite in one of those apocryphal books. But anyways, I digress on that point. But I just wanted to bring the point out that all of Abraham's descendants were black people, or what you would call a Negro, if you will. They were dark skinned. Acts 13 and 1. Simeon is called Niger or nigger. And that is Strong's G3526, meaning black. So Simeon, right, who was in the early church. And the reason why they probably called him Niger or nigger is because he was darker than all of the other Israelites. Like I said, you have that friend who you call black, just like the lighter skinned people you would call red. You see what I'm saying? So Simeon must have been darker than all of the other apostles and all of the other disciples of the early church, and they called him Niger or nigger. Daniel 11, 5 through 6 is describing Hamashiach, right? Also, Daniel 7 and 9 is describing Yah. It's the same description as Revelations 1, 13 through 15, right? It uses words like the beryl, which is a yellow jasper stone. It's the same color as the golden girdle. And guess what it says for both of those references, or all three of those references? What kind of texture was the hair? It always points to wool. And there's only one stock of people, or no, you know what? Only melanated people have hair like wool, because you have different stocks of melanated people. That's another misconception, that all black Africans, quote unquote, are the same and they come from the same stock. That is not true. You can go to Ethiopia and see the Ethiopians who are a little bit lighter and fairer in skin, but they still have woolly hair, if you will. Then you can go down to the Sudan, where you have a lot of the Nilotic people who are jet black and they have woolly hair. You can go down to South Africa and the Bantus, and you can see that they have woolly hair. You can also go up into the Congo of the Pygmies, where they have woolly hair and they're melanated. You can go to Western Africa, where you have the Negroes or Negro land, and they have woolly hair. Then you can go to places like Chad, right? In the Niger Congo area, where the people, all of these people, right? Even in West Africa, for example, you have different tribes like who? You have the Igbo, you have the Yoruba, you have the Fulani, and you have the Hausa, which are some of the main tribes, right? All of those tribes, with the exception of the Igbo and the Yoruba, who come from a similar stock, the Fulani come from a different stock than the Igbo and the Yoruba, and the Hausa. And the Hausa come from a different stock from the Igbo and the Yoruba and the Fulani. But they all are what? Melanated with woolly hair. You see what I'm saying? So when it comes to Africa, Africa is one of the most diverse continents in the world, if not the most diverse. It might only be second behind the Americas because of the colonization and the transatlantic slave trade and the things that have happened in the Americas. But as far as with you looking at different tribes, Africa is one of the most genetically diverse and one of the most diverse populations. So all quote unquote black Africans don't come from the same stock. That's a huge misconception. It's honestly racist, if you want to be honest with yourself, because if I told a Germanic person, oh, you know, different from an Irish person, or you know, different from a Scottish person, or you know, different from a Finnish person, right? They would take offense to that because they are different, if you will. Or I say, oh, you the same as Turkic people, or you the same as Caucasian people. You see what I'm saying? Or you no different from the people in Azerbaijan or Russia, right? Y'all all white, right? You see what I'm saying? You see the misconception in that. All of them have different phenotypes and different stocks. You see what I'm saying? So it's important to make a differentiation between different stocks of people, although they live on the same continent. Just like in India, where you have the cities, right? You also have the Andaman Island people, who I'm going to get into as well, who don't look anything like the typical Indian. You see what I'm saying? You see the genetic diversity? All right. Also, Exodus 4:6-7, Numbers 12:10-15, and 2 Kings 5:20-27 all talk about biblical leprosy. What is biblical leprosy? Biblical leprosy is not when your limbs are being eaten off by the current leprosy that we know. That's not what biblical leprosy is. Biblical leprosy is albinism, or the skin turning white. You see what I'm saying? You can read when Moses put his hand inside of his cloak and inside of his garment, and then he pulled it out. It was leprous, as white as snow. So he put his black hand, or his melanated hand, into his garment and pulled it out, and it was not like the rest of his skin, which was melanated. Also, 2 Kings 5, talking about Naaman and Gehazi, right? What happened? Gehazi was cursed with the same curse that Naaman had, Naaman the Syrian. So the Syrians were even ancient Syrians, the original Syrians, not the Neo-Syrians, but the ancient ones were melanated people. All right, so let's get into the history. Also, I encourage y'all to go and read all those scriptural references. All right, so the history, you have the enslavement in Egypt, and we're going to go over sources and different reliefs and depictions of these events. So you have the enslavement in Egypt, you have the Assyrian captivity, you have the Babylonian captivity, you have the destruction of Jerusalem, you have the quote unquote lost 10 tribes, and you have the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition. So the enslavement in Egypt, right? Our scripture references Genesis 47:27. Israel became established as a nation in Egypt, which is Africa, where they multiplied. So what were they doing when they were down in Egypt? Were they not taking Egyptian and Cushite wives, and even wives of the Hyksos, and daughters of the Hyksos, and all the people who lived in the land, who are all melanated people? They had to, in order to multiply. You see what I'm saying? So they took the women who they were around to wife. So let's just pretend that the Israelites originally weren't black people coming into Egypt. If they didn't come in black, they sure left black, because what did they do? They mixed with black people or melanated people. We all know, and I know a lot of people like to mainly racist people and pseudo scientific people. They like to say the ancient Egyptians were not black, but I mean, come on, man, it's laughable. But we know the ancient Egyptians were black. Nobody debates if the ancient Cushites were black or the current Cushites are black. Nobody debates that, right? And the Hyksos, who were Asiatic people, a lot of them were Hamites too, from different tribes of the Canaanites, right? They were also black and melanated people, right? But anywho, we see right here, the bottom right, we see Semitic laborers or Israelites making bricks in Egypt, because guess what? What do we read in the book of Exodus? That the Israelites were making bricks. They were brick makers, right? And they built treasure cities in Egypt, right? So here we have, and it's not specifically label them Israelites. It says Semitic laborers. If you ever go and research this depiction, it's in the I forget the tomb, the wall of the tomb. But you all can look it up. Just look up Semitic laborers making bricks. And I mean, look at these people. Like, okay, I mean, we clearly see they're melanated, right? But not all melanated people have Negroid phenotypes. I understand that. But even look at their phenotype, right? You have some that have black hair, some that have blonde hair, right? And that could be basically fading of the color over time, or it could be that they have blonde hair, right? We see different melanated peoples can have blonde hair, but you also see in Africa, specifically in like the Sudan, in Ethiopia, you have different tribes of people. What do they use to dye their hair? They use cow urine. So you see different things like that and practices like that they could dye their hair blonde. You see what I'm saying? So we can observe that, and we can also observe their hair. It's not straight, but it's coily. It looks like, especially this guy right up here, it looks like this guy, or yeah, this guy. I'm not gonna say a woman, because it wasn't. I don't believe there's no women out there making bricks, or no women out there making bricks. It could have been. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But anyways, you can see that it clearly looks like he has an afro, and these guys look like they have low cuts, but their hair is still coily, because if their hair was anything other than woolly or nappy, it would show that, especially with straight hair. You see what I'm saying? Also, right here, you see a Semite terracotta head. This is a Semite in bondage in Egypt. Again, melanated brown person. This person is the same skin tone as me. Look at his beard, right? I'm gonna tell you something. That's something that you commonly see with depictions of ancient Semites is beards. And versus Hamitic people, you'll notice that they don't have beards, especially the Cushites. And also the Egyptians as well. You see that they don't have beards. You see that more with ancient depictions of Semites. Even with people like in Babylon, ancient depictions of the Babylonians, they always had beards, and the Assyrians always had beards. The Israelites always had beards, because what is written in our Torah, don't shave your beard. All right. Also, no, this is the Semite terracotta head. I'm sorry. This is a Hebrew slave in Egypt. I'm sorry about that. So Semite terracotta head, right? This is a Semite. Look at his hair. Look at his hair. I have the same form of hairstyle that he has right now in my head. If I were to take my covering off, my head covering, you all would see that I have the same kind of hairstyle, and it's basically like coils or twists, if you will, but it's naps. It's naps, what we would call naps. You can also look at his nose. One thing that we have to get out of the mindset of is thinking that all Negroes are broad nose and big lips. That is not true. Negroes, I'm speaking specifically for African Americans and those of us in the diaspora, who are transplanted and taken in the slave trade. You will find all different type of phenotypes amongst us. You will find some with sharper features. You'll find some with broader features. You'll find some with thin lips. You'll find some with thick lips. You'll find some in between. You'll find some with straighter hair. Like myself, for example, my hair isn't very, very nappy, right? And I have different textures of hair all over my head. So on the sides of my head, my hair is more straighter. If I were to grow it out, even when I had dreads, it was hard for me to lock certain parts of my hair because I had straight hair, like no relaxers, no curlers or nothing. But the hair on the top of my head was always more nappy and coily, so it was easier to lock. You see what I'm saying? So we have different shades of hair, different shades of skin. We have different phenotypes. All of us are not the same phenotype. So we have to get out of that whole misconception of, well, Negroes are big-lipped and broad-nosed and dark as the ace of spades. That is not true. We come in all colors, we come in all phenotypes, and we come in all hair textures. All right, the Assyrian captivity. We can read 2 Kings 17, 1 through 26. The Israelites were taken captive into Assyria and they were replaced by the who? Sepharvaim, who the current Sephardic, people who claim descendants of Sephardics, they really descend, if you want to be honest, they really descend from the Sepharvaim people, not the actual true Spanish and Portuguese Yahudim or Jews, as we're going to get into that history later. So 2 Kings 18 and 1 through 6, you see the taking of Lachish. Lachish, which is in southern Judah or Judea, is where Assyria took prisoners of war that were in the Lachish reliefs. We're going to get into the Lachish reliefs. There's an argument going around that the captives that we see in the Lachish relief, who we'll see are Negroes with coily hair and coily beards, and you can see their Negro phenotypes. A lot of people, pseudo-scientific people or pseudo-historians, they would say that those were Cushites because King Taharka, which was the king of Egypt and Cush, he was going to assist Judah in fighting King Sennacherib. However, the only thing is, when you dig into the scriptures, you'll see that the timeline of when King Taharka went to fight against King Sennacherib, which is in 2 Kings 18, 17 through 37, it was after Lachish was taken. You can also read in Isaiah 37, 1 through 35. So the captives that were in the Lachish relief were in fact Judeans. They were not Cushites, because it wasn't until after Lachish was taken that King Taharka went up to fight against King Sennacherib and sent aid to the Yahudim. So these are the Lachish reliefs. Look at their hair. You see tight coils. You can also see it in their beards. And there's another argument that's rampant. What you'll see if you post these reliefs, right, you'll see people who descend from the current occupants of the land. They will say things like, well, you never heard of a Jufro? Because you have different, occupants who are, the European stock. They might have more curly hair and it may look like an afro. However, this is not an afro. This is tight coils and twists at a very very early stage. I remember when I used to grow my hair when I was younger. Like as soon as it gets to the length to where I can start twisting it, I would start twisting it. And that's what you see these guys are doing right here. But also, I would also argue the point to people who say, well, that's a Jufro. Okay, well, what about the beard? Because usually, right, let's say you see a descendant of a current occupant who appears to have an afro. First off, I would want to look into their genetics, because you would probably see some mixture in their admixture. But also, I digress on that point. What about their beards, right? Because their beards are usually straight. Their beards are not twistable like that. Look at these beards. You have tight coiled beards. So you gotta have, so the hair on your head must match the hair on your face, and they both must be nappy in order for you to look like these people. And the only people on earth who look like these people are what you would call Negro people, because our beards are the same texture as our hair on our head. Here's some depictions, right? Because also you see the short twist or the short coils. Look at this guy right here to the right. Looks identical, right? You see that this guy doesn't have a really broad nose and real big lips, right? He has a medium-sized nose and medium-sized lips, just like this guy right here. Look at his nose, and we're only getting a side view, but you can also see the lips are a little more full than what you would usually see with a lot of more thinner lip people. His lips, they match. So the hair on his head and the hair on his beard are the same texture, coily, same as this guy right here. Also, we see this guy right here, who was depicted in the Assyrian reliefs, who was also an Israelite. What does he have? He has look like cornrows or dreads or twists, longer twists with a headband on. And then he also has what? A coily beard. And you compare him to this guy on the right. Again, same thing. The only thing this guy's missing is a head, is a headband. But same thing. Look at his nose, same lips, same type beard, facial structure, same cheekbones. You see what I'm saying? This is undeniable. That's why they usually say that these are Cushites, right? but they're not Cushites. But one thing we have to realize is that Israelites mixed with Cushites and Mitzrites or Egyptians. All right, here's some more of the Assyrian beliefs. Look at these guys. Also, look at the Assyrians. What do they have? Tight, coily beards, tight, coily hair. These were Negroid people as well. They were cousins to these people. They were related to these people. All right, same thing right here. Look at these guys. Different, they kind of look similar, but you can kind of see the difference in them. He has a more broader nose. He has a more sharper nose. He has bigger lips. He has thinner lips. You see the little child right here, they have their head covered, so you can't see the texture of their hair. So you can't really tell the race or the stock of this child, but you can look at these grown men and look at, because also this has no color on it. It's all carved in stone. So you get no color, but you get phenotype and you get hair texture. That's how you can kind of narrow it down and see what type of people these were. Again, braids or dreads, tight coily beards. Same thing right here. Tight coily beards. Here's another depiction of the Israelites being punished. Look at their hair. They got beady beads in their hair, a twist. These are either beady beads or twists. Same thing on their beards. Beady beads or twist. Same thing. Two different phenotypes. His nose is more longer and sharper. His nose is more shorter and broader. Lips, you can barely see the lips, but you can kind of see that there's difference. Again, like I said, black people don't all look the same, but they look similar. Of course, we look similar. I'm talking for Negro people, that is. Same thing right here. You see them. The hair gives it away. Now, if these guys had straight hair, I wouldn't say anything. I say, you know what? No, I mean, hey, those are the Israelites. They had straighter hair, so they must have been a more paler complexion. You see what I'm saying? But these people have hair like wool. They have beards like wool. All right, the Babylonian captivity, right? We're going to see depictions from the Babylonian captivity. You have Jeremiah 25 and 1 through 14. I want you all to read about that, the Babylonian captivity. Then you have Psalms 137, which was written about the Babylonian captivity and the Israelites playing instruments or harps singing the songs of Zion, right? And we're going to see the depictions of them with the harps singing the songs of Zion. Look at them. They have braids or cornrows. You can see the Negroid hair. You can also see the beards, the long beards. You can see the higher cheekbones. You can see the noses. You see what I'm saying? He has a shorter nose. He has a longer nose. He has a more broader nose. You can barely see his nose, but you can see his cheekbone high. You see what I'm saying? But look at them. They look the same as from the Assyrian reliefs, just with longer hair. This is a recreation of the picture, in color. So here we see them. I mean, come on, like this is what these people would look like. Now, of course, we don't have color on the actual relief, but if we gather context clues, if you will, we can soundly come to the conclusion that these were Negro people. All right, so let's get into the destruction of Jerusalem. We're gonna get into some sources. You have George E. Lichtblau, author of Jewish Roots in Africa. He had to say this in his book about the Hebrew dispersion into Africa. He says, pressed under sweeping regional conflicts, Jews or Yahudim settled as traders and warriors in Yemen, the Horn of Africa, Egypt, the Kingdom of Cush and Nubia, North African Punic settlements like Carthage and Volubilis, and areas now covered by Mauritania. More migrants followed these early Yahudim settlers to northern Africa. And so this is basically placing the Yahudim or the Israelites in Africa, dispersed into Africa. And what you will see in more sources as we get into over time, they had different things like Roman Jewish wars, where these people were pushed down more into Western Africa, where we see Negro land, and also down into the coast of Luango, Angola, Congo, and different things like that, and concentrated in those areas. In Rudolph R. Windsor's book, From Babylon to Timbuktu, which he provides source after source after source to back his claims in his book, he says in the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Yahudim state with a great slaughter. Many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Yahudim fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Yahudim slaves. So, if you ever look at a map where Israel is, right, and right above Israel, you have Assyria and you have Turkey and all these different type of places, Iraq. All these places were controlled by the Romans. So, in times of persecution, the Yahudim would always flee south into Egypt. We see that from the book of Jeremiah all the way up until the Gospels, when Christ and his family, they fled from Herod. They went where? Down into Egypt. You see what I'm saying? That was a common thing for the Yahudim or the Israelites to go down south into Africa, where they sought refuge against all type of persecution. That's what we see. All right. Adrian of Nicodemo, a Greek historian and philosopher, reports that 3,000 Negroes were annually brought down the Nile River in his time, right? And this was the times of what? Destruction of Jerusalem, the Yahudim being taken as slaves. Robert Eisler, in a classic 1931 study of Josephus' testimony was able to reconstruct the unaltered testimony based on a newly discovered Old Russian translation that preserved the original Greek text. And this is his description of the biblical description of Yeshua. It states, at that time also there appeared a certain man of magic power, if it be meet to call him a man, whose name is Yeshua, whom certain Greeks call a son of Elohim, but his disciples call the true prophet. He was a man of simple appearance, mature age, black skin or malacharis. So black skin, short growth, 3 cubits tall, hunchback, prognathous, with a long face, a long nose, eyebrows meeting above the nose, with scanty curly hair, but having a line in the middle of his head after the fashion of the Nazarenes with an undeveloped beard. So clearly we see Yeshua was black skinned with scanty curly hair. I mean, come on, man. They're rocking science. All right, Herodotus' description of the Egyptians, right? Because a lot of people like debate that, oh, the ancient Egyptians weren't black. Okay, so some of the most often quoted white historians are Strabo, Diodorus, Siculus, and Herodotus, so-called father of history, 5th century BC. Herodotus states in a few passages that the Egyptians were black/dark. According to most translations, Herodotus states that a Greek oracle was known to be from Egypt because she was black, that the natives of the Nile region are black with heat, that the Egyptians were black-skinned with woolly hair. Lucian observes an Egyptian boy and notices that he is not merely black but has thick lips. Diodorus Siculus mentioned that the Ethiopians considered the Egyptians a colony. Apollodorus, a Greek, calls Egypt the country of the black-footed ones. Aeschylus, a Greek poet, wrote that Egyptian seamen had black limbs. Greeks sometimes referred to Egyptians as Ethiopians, not to be confused with the inhabitants of modern-day Ethiopia, who are instead referred to as Abyssinians or Habesha, and their land as Abyssinia. So we see that the ancient Egyptians and Ethiopians were black. Tacitus, description of Hebrews. A Roman historian named Tacitus, who lived about CE 90, said, many assert that the Hebrews are a race of Ethiopian origins. Also, in J.A. Rogers' books, who was a Jamaican author and journalist, and historians commented for the Romans to have considered them Ethiopians is a clear indication of their color, because the Ethiopians are a known black people. Tacitus also said that the Hebrews were Egyptians who left Egypt during a disease outbreak. So they would get these people confused for each other, just like we see the Apostle Paul, just like we see Moses, like we see a lot of different people who are mistaken for what? Egyptians. All right, let's get into the lost 10 tribes. So, during the Assyrian captivity, right, we all know that Sennacherib came up against the northern kingdom and took them into what? Slavery. After that, it was said that the lost 10 tribes were exiled past the river Sambation, right? Sambation is also spelled Sambation or Sambation, legendary Sabbath river, meaning beyond which the lost 10 tribes of Israel were exiled in 721 BC by Shalmaneser, king of Assyria. Legends describe it as a roaring torrent, often not of water but of stones, the turbulence of which ceases only on the Shabbat when the Yahudim are not allowed to travel. Okay, so we see the Sambatyon River is often not of water but of stones. Okay, it's a roaring torrent. All right, so this is a source. 1865, Israel exiled into West Africa. This is from a good brother, Good Brother's website named Dante Fortson. Dante Fortson has a lot of sources on his website, Black History in the Bible. I suggest you all go check it out. But the source is West African countries and peoples, British and native, with the requirements necessary for establishing government, um, blah, blah, blah. This was written in 1868 AD, page 189 to 190. Now, I don't think I have it on here. No, I don't have it on there. So look up this source in your own time. And this is a source. This is a source talking about Israelites in West Africa. I hate that I didn't attach it to the slide or put it in the slide, but you guys go check that out. Black History in the Bible. This is the name of the source. All right. Also, the Lost 10 Tribes. More sources. Now this is a source called Relations D. Eldad the Danite. Now this is a source written in French, right? I had to translate this using Google Translate because it's written in French. But this is talking about Eldad the Danite. Now, Eldad the Danite is widely known in a lot of Jewish sources and different things like that. And Eldad the Danite came from Africa, right? But the misconception is a lot of people believe that Eldad the Danite came from Ethiopia, and he was from East Africa. A lot of people believe that the current Ethiopian Jews, that's who Eldad is descent from. However, we're going to read in these sources that Eldad the Danite was in fact from West Africa and not East Africa. So page 28 states, and we're going to read page 28, 29, an excerpt. At the time, several families of 3 other tribes of Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali, who were Israelites, also immigrated and camped in the desert of Arabia until they reached the borders of Cush. They made war on the Cushites and killed so many of them that they depopulated a space of 4 days out of 4 days' march to the place occupied by their brethren of the race of Dan, having chosen Havilah as a dwelling place, which must not be confused with Eastern Havilah, where there is gold, and Seba, Sapta, Ramah, Saptaka, Sheba, and Dedan. These 4 tribes, Dan, Zebulun, Asher, and Naphtali, were forced to wage war against these 7 kingdoms, right? 7 kingdoms of the Cushites. Soon they made the heads of their enemies bow before them and established themselves in their place in these 7 kingdoms. Nevertheless, each year until today, they are in hostility with 7 other tribes, forming as many sovereignties called Themani, Kaibar, Koratia, Bedra, Nabat, Aur, and Yaboah. As a result of these continual wars, many of the Israelites were scattered beyond the rivers of Cush, so that the word of the prophet may come true. Zephaniah 3 and 10. From beyond the rivers of Cush, my scattered worshipers will bring me offerings. So what's on the other side of East Africa? That is West Africa. So they were scattered beyond the rivers of Cush. This is a historical source. Also, this is another historical source. I'm going to read this whole thing. In the name of Yah, the Elohim of Israel, praise be the name of the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed be he who has chosen Israel out of all nations, who have given them the law and the commandments, who has separated them from 70 tongues, and who has ordered them to keep the 613 precepts. So long as Israel fulfilled the will of Elohim, no nation could subdue it. And so Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, rose, sinned, and made Israel sin by making 2 golden calves. Then the kingdom of the house of David divided, and Jeroboam gathered together the 10 tribes and told them, rise up and make war against Rehoboam in Jerusalem. We can read about that in Kings, right? And Chronicles. They, however, answered, why should we fight against our brethren and against the son of our master David, the king of Yasharal in Judah? The elders of Israel said, there are no more valiant warriors in all the tribes of Israel than in the tribe of Dan. Therefore, Jeroboam ordered the children of Dan to make war against Judah. They, however, said, by the life of our father's son, we will not fight against our brothers and shed their blood for nothing. And they gave themselves up to death, took their swords, spears, and bows in order to make war against Jeroboam, but Elohim saved them from shedding the blood of their brethren. For they proclaimed throughout the whole tribe, saying, Fly to Egypt. So they fly to Egypt, they flee into Egypt. And they took counsel to destroy Egypt and to kill all its inhabitants. But their princes said to them, How can you go to Egypt? Is it not written in the law, ye shall see them again no more, which is in Exodus? Then they took the counsel to fall upon Edom, Amalek, and Ammon. When they heard that it was written in the law of Elohim that Elohim had forbidden Israel to possess their territory. Finally, Elohim gave them good courage and advice to go up the river Pishon and to continue their wandering on camels and to encamp until they reached the land of Cush, which they found fertile, with numerous vineyards and gardens. The Danites settled here and made a covenant with the children of Cush that they should pay tribute to Yasharel. Thus the Danites dwelled here for many years, multiplying and increasing greatly in Cush, right? They were then followed by three other tribes, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, who crossed the desert and encamped until they came in the territory of the Danites. In their wanderings, they slew many Cushites in a territory extending 4 days' journey in each direction. We just read that in the other source, right? All right, so I'm going to skip down a little bit. It says they make war every year with 7 kingdoms and 7 languages. The following are their names, who are on the other side of the rivers Cush. Thus the words of the prophet, from beyond the rivers of Cush, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering. Zephaniah 3 and 10 are fulfilled. So it's saying that these Israelites live beyond the rivers of Cush, or on the opposite side of East Africa, which is West Africa. All right, and so I'm gonna stop that source, and this is a source called "Where Are the 10 Tribes?" Also, here's the Jewish Quarterly talking about the River Sambatyon. It says the River Sambatyon is 200 yards broad, about as far as a bow shot, full of sand and stones, but without water. What does this sound like to y'all? The stones make a great noise like waves of the sea and a stormy wind, so that in the night the noise is heard at a distance of half a day's journey. There are sources of water which collect themselves in one pool, out of which they water the fields. So the River Sambatyon, right? All right, so I'm gonna skip down a little bit. It says the 4 tribes, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, stand on the borders of the river. When shearing their flocks here, for the land is flat and clean without any thorns. When the children of Moshe see them gathered together on the border, they shout, saying, Brethren, their remarks, no, brethren, tribes of Jeshurun, show us your camels, dogs, and asses. And they make their remarks about the length of the camel's neck and the shortness of the tail. Then they greet one another and go their way. All right, so I'm gonna stop that right there. Let me make sure there's nothing else nothing of main importance that I want to hit. Okay, matter of fact, no, I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna read this bottom portion. It says, to us came the pious man Eldad of the tribe of Dan to bring good tidings to scattered Israel. When he left the land on the other side of the rivers of Cush, so he left the land, which is West Africa, he traveled with the man of the tribe of Asher in a small boat with the intention of doing some commerce with the crew, more especially to buy cloaks and jewelry. So this is Eldad. All right, so we're going to go more to Eldad. Now, this is another French source written in 1447. It's called Le Bassin du Niger. It says, travelers passing through, and it's on page 10. Travelers passing through immediately become the clients of one of those neighborhood chiefs who defend them to the death. Thus, merchants find themselves completely in much greater security than the monarchical states like Limson and Tunis. Such is still the town of Tamatit. It still has flanked towers which envelops clearly defined quarters with narrow streets, and it was the beginning of the 20th century, a republican administered by a gemma of notables, and the sheep by the eyebrow of the eye is the meaning of Tamatit in Berber bears the marks of deep decline, and its inhabitants recall with regret the time it was Tamatit la Jewish. All right, we see Jew right there. Okay, that era, the Jewish period, was still known to Malfonte. It was ended a few years later. There was a time when the descendants of those warlike Jews from Cyrenaica and Mauritania. So you had warlike Jews in Cyrenaica and Mauritania. Tingitane, who had not feared to confront the Roman army, had been masters of the Sahara. One of their number, Eldad of the tribe of Dan, assigned as boundaries to the empire Senegal in Niger, Tekrur, and Kikuyu. So Dan assigned the boundaries where the warlike Yahudim were to the empire Senegal and Niger. That's West Africa, y'all. That's near Negro land. That's where the slaves was taken from. Okay, even today, says M. Lee Chatelier, the Moorish tribes which border Senegal present numerous individuals among whom the Hebrew type is strongly remarked. Eldad the Danite, who arose in the 9th century from the borders of Sudan, claimed that his tribe had immigrated there from Palestine after the death of King Solomon. He spoke a peculiar Hebrew, somewhat akin, it seems, to Phoenician, and he recognized no other religious authority than that of Joshua or Yahshua, son of Nun. It seems, oh no, I'm sorry. What was I at? Okay, the Jewish empire of the Sahara, to which Eldad attributed an extent of 200 days' march, disappeared during the Arab invasion. Moreover, Islam drew in its wake Jews from Hijaz, Kibar, Mosul. The rabbinism overwhelmed the ancient code of pre-Talmudic communities. Once again, Asia had conquered Africa. So it's saying the Asiatic descendants who came from Asia, which are Israelites, had conquered Africa. And where did they put their borders? This said Senegal and Niger, Tekrur and Kikuyu. This is all in West Africa, you guys. So this is where we see the northern tribes had migrated to. All right, this is a source called The History of the Jewish People, page 278. I am going to start at the second half, right down here. Said some 40 years earlier, another visitor was entertained by the Jews of Kairouan, Eldad, son of Mali. Where's Mali at, y'all? Timbuktu, Senegal area, West Africa. Okay, son of Mali. The Danite alleged that he was a descendant of the tribe of Dan. He related that his tribe had immigrated from their Palestinian home so as not to take part in the civil war at the time of Jeroboam's succession, and were residing in the land of Havilah beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. 3 other tribes, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, were with them. These had joined them in the times of Sennacherib. Opposite them, there the children of Moses, sprung from the Levites, who had mutilated the fingers of their right hand rather than to sing the songs of Zion by the rivers of Babylon, and had been translated by a cloud to their present abode. His own people, so Eldad, were able to communicate with them only from afar, since they were cut off from one another by a waterless torrent which carried masses of sand and rubble. What does this sound like, y'all? It says, this impassable river rested on the Sabbath day when it was enveloped in a thick mist, hence the river was named Sabbatation. So for you all who don't know, the river Sabbatation is the Sahara Desert, a waterless torrent with sand and stones. This is the Sahara Desert. All right. Page 32, this is Leo Africanus, the description of Africa, volume 1. It says, howbeit they say that upon the Nilus, or the Nile River, do inhabit two great and populous nations, one of Yahudim toward the west under the government of a mighty king. So here we see Jews who live upon the Nile River, right? And they're under the government of a mighty king. All right, this is Rivaka Gonin, the quest for the lost 10 tribes. It says some accounts place some West African Jewish community in the Ondo Forest of Nigeria, south of Timbuktu. This community maintained a Torah scroll as late as 1930s, written in Aramaic that had been burnt into parchment with a hot iron instead of ink, so it cannot be changed. So we have a Jewish or a Yahudim community in the Ondo Forest of Nigeria, south of Timbuktu, and they maintained the Torah scroll as late as the 1930s, written in Aramaic. They're supposed to be primitive Negroes and primitive Africans. They're not supposed to know this stuff. All right, this is the travels of Ludovico di Barthema in Egypt, Syria, Arabia Desert, and Arabia Felix in Persia, India, and Ethiopia from 1503 to 1508. It states, at the end of 8 days, were found a mountain which appeared to be 10 or 12 miles in circumference, in which mountain dwelt 4,000 or 5,000 Jews who go naked and are in height 5 or 6 spans, and have a feminine voice and are more black than any other color. They lived entirely upon the flesh of sheep and eat nothing else. They are circumcised and confess that they are Jews. More black than any other color. All right. The Earth and Its Inhabitants, the Universal Geography by Elise Recluse, Volume 12, West Africa. The Mandinka, or the Mandingans, right? They were taken into slave trade, right? Who are now broken up into many rival petty states, are excellent husbandmen, but display their rather remarkable talents chiefly as traders. They have been compared to the Saracoles or the Soninke, who are the Jews of West Africa. So the Soninke or the Saracoles are the Jews of West Africa. Wow. This is from Professor Dr. Alfred Bodenheimer, and he states in his Haaretz opinion piece, he refers to the work of one of his doctoral students whose study he claims shows British rabbis were already aware in the 1840s that there might be descendants of the 10 tribes in the Niger Delta. That was even before the process of the Jewish acceptance of Beta Israel or the Ethiopian Jews began. Evidently, though, the Igbos, who today number 20 to 30 million people, will be political and demographic dynamite. So we see that this current occupation and statehood we see today is driven by politics. It's not prophecy, it's politics. All right, I'm gonna stop on this slide right here, and then I'm gonna finish up with the part 2, which will go into more of the history and then genetics. But I want to read this. Whereas the Igbos do not tolerate, and this is quotes from the Moravian Church missionaries. They were missionaries going to the slaves and I guess ministering to the slaves. Whereas the Igbos do not tolerate one uncircumcised slave among them. Only when he is circumcised do they accept him as worth human company. So the Igbos, they don't accept. I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know how that happened. Let me get back to what I was on. Hold on, let me. All right. So the Igbos, they don't accept a slave that ain't circumcised. So here we have circumcision. What is circumcision? Circumcision is the sign of the covenant given to Abraham, right? Also, I'm going to read this quote as well from the same book. It says, among the Igbos, they, the priests, are taken out of a sort of people whom they call living sacrifices. These very ones live celibate and without property and at the expenses of others, and have the liberty to take from others all of what they need, and nobody hinders them. Like the Pharisee among the Yahudim, they let their hair grow, and the use of the scissors is not permitted to them. So we see Hebraic customs among the Igbo slaves, who we just read in a previous piece written by a descendant of the current occupant, stating that they were well aware that the Igbos were Hebrews, but due to the politics of it, they could be dynamite to the political statehood of what we see today in the land. So they chose to kind of put them on a hush hush, and they knew about them before they knew about the Ethiopian Jews or Beta Israel. So here we see Hebrewisms amongst the Hebrews. So I'm going to stop it right here. Next, we're going to get into some fun facts, and then we're going to go into the rest of the history. We are currently on slide 48 of 182. So you can see that we have a lot of slides and a lot of stuff to cover. It might be broken down into 3 portions, but just bear with me. So with that being said, I appreciate you all for tuning in. I want to say Shabbat Shalom to you all. And, peace and blessings. Our praises be to the Most High Yah of Israel or Yasharal. And I pray this video bless somebody. Shalom.